someone who wants to go into poultry production called me and he wanted to find out if he should consider the battery cage or the deep litter. And I think this is a question that for most of us that want to go into poultry production usually ask. And so today I want to use the opportunity to share a thing or two about poultry production with you. And then based on what you want to achieve at the end of the day, you make your personal decisions out of what I'm going to share with you. I will answer the question. But before you answer some of these questions, you have to consider a few things. So I'm going to do that. But before I answer the question or we consider those few things, let me take you back to the type of systems that you can use to keep or to produce birds, or in other words, start a poultry production. So in poultry production, there are three systems that we usually use to keep the birds. The first one is the extensive. That's what we usually see the local birds experiencing. They are allowed to go and then look for their own feed. The second one is the semi-intensive. So of course, semi-intensive, you give them a certain amount of feed, but then that is not enough. So you also allow them to roam and then look for an additional feed to what you've given them. And then the last one is the intensive. So for the intensive, they are kept under a controlled environment and they are being fed every now and then. Now, for the purpose of this video, we are not going to focus so much on the extensive and then the semi-intensive. So our attention would be drawn to the intensive. Under this same intensive, there are three ways that you can keep the birds. The first one is what we call the slated floor. So that is what is showing on the screen, the slated floor. The second one is what we call the deep litter. That is also showing on the screen, the deep litter. And then the third one is the battery cage. The third one is the battery cage. Now, slated floor is not common in Ghana, and so we are not going to pay a lot of attention to it today. But we are going to focus on the deep litter and then the battery cage. So yeah, if you are somebody who wants to raise the birds for the purposes of their meat, in other words, if you want to do broilers, now the system that I will personally recommend is the deep litter. Why would I recommend the deep litter? For two reasons. The first reason is that the broilers are going to be kept for a maximum of just 8 weeks. Just 8 weeks, which is approximately 2 months. And so, looking at the cost of the cages, it wouldn't make economical sense as a business person to go for cages if you want to do broilers. However, if you are going to do a large capacity and then you have the markets and you want to be efficient, then you may want to consider the battery cage for the broilers. But in my opinion, I would always advise that you go for the deep litter for your broiler production. The second reason is that for the purposes of the quality of the meat, it is advisable that you allow the birds to roam or to walk around freely to improve the meat quality if you want to raise the birds for their meat. And so for those that want to go into broiler production, the second reason why you may want to consider deep litter is for the quality of the meat. Now, if you are somebody who wants to go into layers, in other words, you want to raise the birds for the purposes of the eggs, then I would advise or I would suggest you go for the battery cage. Of course, you can use the deep litter to also raise the birds for the purposes of the egg production, but waste management and other factors would hinder the efficiency as compared to battery cage. However, the battery cage also comes with certain things that you have to consider before you can fully say, I want to do egg production, and so I'm going in for the battery cage. The first one is the cost. The cages are very expensive, and so you have to check the financial capacity or the financial strength you have before you can fully say you want to go in for the battery cage. The second thing is that if you are somebody who is very passionate about animal welfare, then the battery cage might not be ideal for you, because throughout almost 80 plus weeks that you are going to keep these birds, they would always be kept in these cages throughout their life cycle. And so if you are somebody who is very passionate about animal welfare and you would want the animal to also sort of have their freedom, then the battery cage might not be ideal for you, and so you would definitely want to go into the deep litter. And so for meat production, I would always recommend deep litter for quality of meat and then for cost efficiency. For egg production, I would always recommend battery cage. That is if you have the money to bear the cost that comes with it, and if you don't have any problem with animal welfare. So these are some of the things that would help you decide whether to choose deep litter for your poultry production or battery cage for your poultry production.